Welcome back to Lighting Design 101 with your instructor, Denise Remping. I am Denise Remping, come to bring you another lesson about basic lighting fundamentals and theory. This video is going to be about building looks, how to create specific looks on stage for various scenes in a production. As I've mentioned in two previous videos now, any design should begin with your basic full stage coverage, making sure all your areas and the objects or people within them are visible to your full audience. From there, you can add on specials to create additional elements to your design. Some of these elements may be as simple as needing a single solitary spotlight down right. This look can be accomplished by either an ellipsoidal, if it is a fixed location, or a follow spot, if the spotlight needs to move. These sorts of elements are simple enough to add in, but sometimes you're going to need something a bit more complex. For example, there is a big difference between a scene that takes place in a small diner at night and a scene that takes place on the wide open tundra of the Arctic Circle. Understanding how to create these separate looks is what is going to make your design stand out from just a simple lights on, lights off situation. Let me first discuss the things you will need to consider in order to build a look. Number 1, light source. Where is your light coming from? Does this scene take place outside? If so, then the sun is most likely your light source. Where is the sun? If it's morning or late afternoon, it may be low toward the horizon. If it's midday, then it's high in the sky. What if it's nighttime? Where's your light source then? What about interior scenes? Is your light source coming from overhead or ceiling lights? Is it coming from an open window? What about lamps? Are they standard light bulbs? Gas lamps? Maybe you have a fireplace. Where is your light coming from? Number 2, time of day. Morning, midday, afternoon, early evening, nighttime, dawn. All of these specific times have different looks. A sunset may produce a very orange light, but a noontime sun's light is very white. Evening looks are cool and dark. If your scene is inside, not outside, how does time of day affect the light within? The light in a room looks very different in the middle of the day than it does in the middle of the night. What time of day does your scene take place? Number 3, location. Where does your scene take place? Is it inside, outside, the middle of the desert, the middle of a jungle, a park in the springtime, New England in the dead of winter, on a beach, in a coffee shop, at a grocery store? All of these locations have different light. The light in a desert will look very different than the light in the middle of a thick jungle. Where is your scene taking place? Number 4, mood, atmosphere, themes. How can light enhance a scene outside of natural elements? Is this scene sad, happy, scary? Does the director want to build an element of suspense? Or maybe they want to show two people are falling in love. Is there an element of danger? Or is the main character wrestling with inner demons? All of these can be enhanced through your lighting design. What sort of mood, atmosphere, or theme exists in your scene? Once you've established these 4 elements, then you can start looking at what you will need for each scene. Let's take a closer look at some specific looks, and I will break them down for you. Let's first take a look at the same set with different looks. This set was from a production of Far from the Maddening Crowd. The first image, you can see the stage lit up with yellow light. In this particular instance, the yellow light gives the set an old world sort of feel, like the faded yellowed image you'd see in an old photograph. If you look at the shadows of the tree, you can see the light from the front. But if you look at the objects on the right, or stage left, you'll see the light is coming from overhead. The intensity is fairly high, giving this image a brighter appearance. In the second image, the number of lights has diminished, mostly coming from the top and behind, and the intensity has lowered. The background has darkened using a low-intensity blue. Take note of the tree's shadow now. There is still that old world feel, but now it is clearly later in the day. The third image has even fewer lights. There are a few soft lights coming from the left, or stage right, shining down on the walkway and hitting the branches of the tree. But the brightest light is coming from behind the scenery with a pale blue. This gives the image the look of early morning, with the sun just starting to crest up over the horizon. The fourth image has a bit more to look at. There are now blue lights shining down on the walkway, but also take a look at the shadows on the hill. Not all of those are coming from the tree. In fact, most of them, I would wager, are gobos. I find the lighting on the tree most interesting. There is clearly a light shining on the branches from offstage, looks to be low in angle, but with the subtle violet light in the background, it really casts the tree into something creepy, not quite a silhouette, but still something a bit sinister. From this image, I would guess the designer was going for nighttime, given the use of gobos and blue light, but maybe just before the crack of dawn. The last image is definitely nighttime. Again, lots of blue lights and the use of gobos. But there is also a moon. I would guess that the moon is actually a gobo, but one made of glass. Yes, gobos can be made of glass, even colored glass. The moon could also be a projection from an actual projector. The lit-up background casts all the trees and bushes into silhouette, emphasizing that creepy night factor. I also appreciate the single yellow light downstage. It really pops in this image because of how it contrasts with the blue. I can imagine that this light could be used to isolate actors in this scene. Let's take a look at some other images. I mentioned that location of your light source is important. Never is that more obvious than when using gobos, specifically window gobos. Light comes through windows and casts the shadow of the window into the scene. This image shows a room with two light sources. The first is obvious, the window casting pale blue moonlight into the room from the front. But if you look closely, you'll see there is a second light source upstage left, on the right side of the image. An open doorway is casting a yellow light into the room. You can see its long beam stretching across the floor, and it faintly hits objects upstage and onstage right. An interior light such as this would be yellow. It neatly contrasts the blue light from the window. Here's another example of a window gobo. There are a lot of pink lights in this scene. This looks like a bed, so I would assume, based on the use of pink, this implies the location of a love scene. Considering the dark pink, nearly red appearance, I would even go so far as to say this image implies a very physically intimate relationship. Notice that the window gobo is a lighter hue to make it stand out. Here is another window gobo. Based on the orange and blue lights of the cyc in the background, this scene probably takes place in early evening. The sun has set, but still casts a bit of orange over the horizon. The window gobo casts a long yellowed beam into the room, implying a source of light that is artificial, probably a street light. More window gobos. What do you feel this image is trying to convey? What time of day is it? Where is this taking place? What is the mood or emotion the designer is trying to portray? Let's take a look at some other images where light source can be important. This image, for example, has significant light coming from behind the bars, casting their image down onto the stage and the actors. The addition of the tree branches adds texture to the lights as well, but notice that they do not cast shadows onto the stage. The image of the bars is clear and crisp looking. If you look really closely, you will also notice that you can see the actors' faces, implying that there is at least some frontal light. Otherwise, their faces would be in shadow. Here's some fun lighting. Each cell has its own little light bulb, but you'll notice the shadows from the bars are minimal. The eye instead is drawn to the line of blinding white spotlights. To me, this implies overhead lights in a jail. Also take note of the fog in the background. We'll talk a bit more about how fog can be a useful lighting tool in a later video, but notice in this image how that fog is lit up with that brilliant white light. Here are some more bar images using gobos. They give the illusion of barred windows. Notice you can see the actors' faces, implying frontal light. There's also very bright white light shining into the center of the actors, highlighting that particular location on stage. I also want to point out the light on the sides. Can you guess the source of those lights? Those are my favorites. Side lights. As you can see, this image is from a production of The Crucible. Note there is another barred window image. You can actually see the beam coming from the physically present window. What else do you notice in this image? Do you see the third McCandless light hitting the actors from above and slightly behind? What about the background cyc? What does that pale yellow and blue imply? If you are familiar with this moment in The Crucible, you will know that this scene takes place in the early morning, right before John Proctor is hauled off to be hanged for his alleged crime of witchcraft. Take a look at some other images where light source can create interesting looks on stage. My favorite part of this image is the shadows created by the overhead grid. Or look how these single isolating ellipsoidals create a very specific pattern to look. The dark spaces are the areas my eye is drawn to. Ellipsoidals can be really great for creating those isolating images. Where is your eye drawn to in this image? Look what a single sharp beam can create in this image. This look is accomplished using a hazer, a device like a fogger that creates a constant coverage of haze or fog on your stage. It can be really useful in emphasizing your light beams. You can see the hazer in effect again in this image, emphasizing those isolating overhead lights. Take note of the parts of the actor's body that are highlighted. What does this image imply? As I mentioned, time of day is very important to your lighting design. Note the pale yellow of this sunrise look, as if the sun is just peeking up over the horizon. The angle is low. Look, for example, how it hits the house on stage left. In contrast, then, look at the house on stage right, still mostly in shadow. Can you tell where the sun is rising? The cyc in the background is two-toned, with your yellows at the bottom and blues at the top. This look is achieved by having two light sources on your cyc, at the bottom and at the top. Note the range of colors that happen in the middle. Here's another example of the two-toned cyc effect. The bottom is orange and the top a pale blue. Look at the transition between the tones and the range of colors it produces. Here's another pre-dawn look. It's the same set as 2 images ago, but note the difference in the colors. You figured out where the sun was rising in the previous picture. Now take a look at the cyc in the background. Can you see the morning sun just teasing its rising? I also want to point out the windows on the stage right house. There are 2 different lamps visible, 2 more sources of light the designer considered for this moment. Same set again, but now it's afternoon. Look at the angle of the yellow light on the stage right house and the actor standing there. This sun is dipping toward the horizon, but on the opposite side. Again, look at the colors on the cyc. Here's another shot of the same set. What time of day is it now? Where is the light source coming from? Where is the sun? Note the difference in color between the house on the right and the house on the left. Now take a look at the 2 actors down front. Look at how the 2 colors of lights hit them both and how interesting their image becomes because of them. Here's another example of a beautiful sunset image. Where are the lights coming from? How are their location and color affecting the scene? Let me cycle through some nighttime images. What makes these looks different from the others? How is the designer letting the audience know it's nighttime? Let's examine location. How is the designer implying location in these pics? Note the use of green and blue lights in each of these photos. How about the use of gobos? Forest scenes tend to be a rock-solid standard among lighting designers. Most will know exactly how to create one. Take a look at these images. Where are they taking place? Hint, this one is literally from a production of Frozen. But what about this one? Or this one? What sets this image apart from the others? I mentioned in previous videos how light can be used to portray emotion as well. What emotion is being portrayed here? How about here? What emotion does this image conjure up? And there you have a brief and, dare I say it, oversimplified exploration of how to develop specific looks on stage. There are many, many more elements to consider, and with every show I watch, I discover something new I hadn't considered before. As I mentioned in the first video, I am always looking at light in my surroundings and asking myself how I can recreate it on stage. The more you explore lighting, the more you will start to ask yourself the same question. Next time you go to see a production, pay attention to the lights and ask yourself, why did the designer choose to do what they did?